Leasing or setting it aside to other agencies, leasing into private businesses. Examples are like the Sand Island Businessmen's Association has basically almost a 100-acre industrial park. We have a master lease to the association, who then sublets out to probably close to 100 businesses out there in Sand Island. The Banyan Drive resort leases, as well as the Canoa Lehua industrial leases up there in Hilo. It sounds like leasing is a big part of it. It takes up a lot of time, but our duties, or at least what we assist the board of Land and Natural Resources, in addition to that, is a lot of things dealing with shoreline certifications, shoreline encroachments, bringing those matters before the land board for whether it's to legitimize it via an easement, or asking the board to order removal of those structures that are in the public land domain. We also have been helping us to do a lot of this work, because we only have 40 staff statewide. We have had since 2000 roughly the State Land Information Management System, which we are just contracted out to start upgrading our SLIMS system. Since that time, we've had various other legislative acts, requests placed upon us. And since then, we've implemented the Act 178 reporting, annual reporting on the ceded land revenues for the state of Hawaii, for the various agencies that receive revenues from ceded lands, which is part of the OHA settlement. And more recently, just in January, we unleashed the Public Land Information Trust System, which is an online system, very user-friendly, to allow state agents, employees access to information about lands in the state of Hawaii, whether state lands, county lands, private lands, it's all there. SLIMS is really designed to be a property management system to assist us in a lot of the lease management duties, and assist the fiscal office in billing for these the lease, because it's not just the billing for the rent, but that's one part of it, but it's also the insurance, liability insurance and fire. Insurance certificates last basically a year, so we need a report to come out to alert us that whether we got a renewal. And having over 1,000 leases to deal with, we need something like that. Again, we only got like 40 staff statewide. We rely heavily with the fiscal office in assisting us, as well as the other divisions. Yeah, but we work very closely with the fiscal office. Our management for the lease management is going to be lands that are actually occupied by a tenant. So there's a lot of inspections that we try to do. Again, we have over 1,000 leases, and it's tough, especially on outer islands, to get out to all the leased areas. But we try to make sure that they're using the property for the intended use. DOFA, on the other hand, has a lot of large areas, and may not, mountains and stuff like that. So that's a little, we have some of those, but we don't have the staffing like DOFA. We are nowhere close staffed to DOFA, or any other divisions. What takes up a lot of our time is, and so because it does get very complicated, is the shoreline issues. And we work closely with Sam's crew, as well as the State Surveyor's Office, in try to resolve if we see some encroachments going along in the shoreline area. Yeah. One part of land division, it has become prevalent over the years since I started in 2005, was it is often looked to to help support the rest of the department. I mean, I don't think any other division funds programs and stuff out too much outside of the division. But the Special Land Development Fund, which is where we deposit our lease rent revenue, has been is pretty broad in its authority, and so it's been looked to whenever other divisions and offices are maybe short on funds, and it's been short. The Land and Natural Resources Program over the years has taken, it's always usually on the later end of the budget priorities for the legislature. Usually the priorities go to the schools or DOE or UH or human services kind of programs, and when money is tight, the natural resources programs really take a hit. Funded by the Special Land Development Fund. We don't get any general fund support for operating revenues or anything like that. That's our division. And then when we can, we try to share the revenue or share any revenues that other divisions may be short on. An example was, the big one was last year when the legislature a couple years ago mandated our fund to cover $4 million for the International Conservation Conference. And it was probably a larger contribution than what HTA probably put in. The challenges can be anywhere from just the vast amount of lands that we get called upon. We often get called on inquiries about who owns the land or who has jurisdiction over the land, and a lot of times it ends up being another agency has jurisdiction. Hopefully, with the Public Land Information Trust system now online, and and anyone with a Hawaii.gov email can register and get access. Hopefully, that limits the amount of calls. Other problem areas, and we have very complex issues going on right now in the Big Island. Aside from the Naniloa Hotel and its condition, the Banyan Drive lease is coming to an end, and being on month-to-month or year-to-year kind of situation. There's 3 expiring leases out there, and we're still trying to assist the board in some studies and evaluating what is the best course for the future for those lots. I mean, the big issue is whether you tear down or rebuild, and the reason is because those lots, a lot of it are currently, the structures are, if you were to tear it down and rebuild, you wouldn't be able to build within that footprint. You'd have to set it back, you have to be away from the shoreline, etc., build up possibly because of the tsunami area. So there's a lot of issues that are, we've hired an architect to take a look at it and provide us some advice, and some different alternatives. That and other expiring leases coming due, at least not as soon, but there's the industrial leases in Hilo, that's another 10 years away, but still, it's another challenge to kind of plan on what is the best alternative when those lots ultimately come back to DLNR, whether to consolidate, because a lot of them are smaller lots. We're studying that, as well as whether to have a master lease situation as compared to have 80 different leases versus one big lease. And that concept is the Sand Island industrial area, where we have one big master lease who then subleases out. It's definitely easier to manage when you have a good tenant, like we do in Sand Island. It's time-consuming and difficult. It's time-consuming, and a lot of time is spent when you have a lot of different tenants, and you only got a limited amount of staff. So, unencumbered means it's not encumbered by a lease or not set aside by governor's executive order to another agency, whether it's state or county or DOFA or parks. It's just unencumbered. An example of that oftentimes is seaward of the shoreline. Almost all the time that'll be unencumbered, and there may be, sometimes there's encroachments nowadays because of the shoreline, and that's what I was talking about earlier, the seawalls, piers, steps, you know, and what Sam is working on is, you know, the Naupaka, you know, thing, and so that's, yeah. And then there's also land-based stuff, but the land-based thing would be the same thing. It's just land that is not leased out or it's just vacant. A lot of times too, though, they're irregular, something that is not really easily leasable or usable, unless for some reason you find someone who happens to, because it's so irregular and more like a remnant, unless you live next door or have a property next door, you really can't utilize it. Yeah, so.